Damon, the clinic director wants to see you in his office, shouted the nurse through the slightly open door of the department head's office. The man, distracted from the patient's medical history, sighed heavily, set the papers aside, and stood up from his desk. Slamming the door behind him, he headed to his director's office. Damon had a good relationship with Pete. Once, the director of the private clinic noticed the young intern and invited him to work for him. Pete considered himself a mentor to Damon. He tried to support the new employee, sometimes scolding him for work-related mistakes and sincerely celebrating his successes. Pete had dreamed that his own son would also pursue a career in medicine, but he had decided to move abroad to engage in the arts. He rarely called his father, only periodically asking for money, without sharing his achievements, probably because there weren't any. "Come on in, Damon," said Pete as Damon just managed to open the office door. Damon sat down in a chair near Pete's desk. Across from him sat an unfamiliar young woman, who began to curiously examine the doctor who had just entered the office. "Damon, meet Madeline, she's very talented, but still a novice specialist," said Pete. "I'm confident you two will work well together." "I don't recall needing any new staff in my department," Damon said. "Am I supposed to fire someone? Or is Madeline vying for the only available janitor position?" Damon then gave Madeline a displeased look. He realized that the clinic director was trying to employ someone's relative or friend. But he disliked hiring new employees this way. Pete knew this, so he anticipated Damon's reaction. "No one needs to be fired," Pete said calmly. "We've opened an additional position and hired Madeline." "You opened a new position, and this is the first I'm hearing of it?" Damon asked. "It was an unexpected decision," Pete replied with a smile. "I know you prefer seeing patients over filling out paperwork. Madeline will be your deputy and help you with your duties." "Wonderful," Damon responded discontentedly. "So, this new hire is here because of me. Explain to Madeline what she'll need to do." "I think you know what to tell her," Pete said, waving his hand. "That's all, Damon. Don't distract me from my work. Go and train the new employee." "I understand," Damon replied. He was now certain that the arrival of his new deputy was directly related to Pete's promise to find a job for this girl through his acquaintances. Now he just needed to gauge how competent this Madeline was. Since her role involved administrative tasks and paperwork, Damon assumed she had no real medical achievements. Leaving the clinic director's office, Damon walked ahead in silence, trying to manage his irritation towards the new hire. He decided he would definitely talk to Pete that evening and tell him exactly what he thought about such people. "I noticed you weren't happy to see me," Madeline was the first to speak. "Do you think women are stupid and talentless?" "Madeline, I'm the head of the gynecology department. Women are my patients," he replied. "You don't have to respect someone to treat them," she stated. "That's where you're wrong," Damon disagreed. "Respect for patients is essential. And ideally, it should be mutual." After this brief exchange, the head of the gynecology department went on his evening rounds to see his patients, leaving the new employee in the corridor with the head nurse. He then dropped by Pete's office to discuss the sudden appointment of the new staff member. "Understand me, Madeline is the daughter of a good friend of mine," Pete tried to explain. "I don't think she's incapable. She's a good and smart girl." "She's a good and smart girl for her father," Damon countered. "But you don't know her at all," Pete said. "Work with her for a bit, see how she handles her duties, and then draw your conclusions." Unfortunately, despite all his positive qualities, Pete had too many influential friends. And no matter how much he liked Damon, he would always help his wealthy sponsors. This meant that Damon would have to come to terms with Madeline's presence in the clinic. At home, Damon was greeted by darkness and the silence of empty rooms. His son had been staying with his grandparents for a week, and his wife seemed to be out with friends again. On the kitchen table, he found a note written by his wife. "I've gone to visit a friend. I'll be home late," wrote Brooke. Damon put his dinner in the microwave and turned on the TV. A lively host on a popular talk show was discussing the life of another struggling family. The invited celebrities, sitting on leather sofas, offered wise advice to the unfortunate children, criticized the parents' behavior, and spoke about the need to restore justice in the family. Pouring himself some tea amidst the background noise of the TV, Damon felt lonely. He sat in a spacious apartment with expensive furniture and numerous gadgets around him, but he didn't feel happy. It seemed he had been much happier in their old house with his grandmother's cupboard and a simple table from an ordinary store. The evening ended quickly, and Damon fell asleep without receiving a response from his wife to his messages. In the morning, he found her sleeping on the couch in the living room. Quietly, he went to the bathroom, had breakfast, and headed to work. In the clinic corridor, Madeline caught up with him and, walking past, quickly said, "Good morning, Damon." "Good morning, Madeline," he replied, watching her briskly walk ahead. Madeline had a very attractive appearance. Her neat facial features were highlighted by natural makeup, and her beautiful figure was accentuated by fitted clothing. However, her headstrong nature prevented Damon from seeing anything admirable in her. On their first day working together, they argued twice. On the second day, they almost made peace. And on the third day, they argued again. After a week, patients began complaining about Madeline. "Do you think it's normal to argue with clinic patients?" Damon asked sternly. "And do they think it's normal to ask stupid questions?" the woman replied in surprise. "A mother and daughter were asking me completely idiotic questions. The girl is 16 and has no idea about the human body. They're patients, and they come in all types. Many of them ask stupid questions, and we are obliged to answer them," he said. And yes, unfortunately, in many families, topics about women's health are not discussed. So, neither 16-year-old girls nor their mothers, who have lived and given birth, sometimes have any idea about their bodies. This is no reason to argue or quarrel with them. You just need to calmly explain everything to them. That patient, the crazy woman, Madeline continued to defend herself, was demanding an abortion for her daughter, who wasn't even pregnant. How was I supposed to react to that request? Agree with her and praise her? You could have called me if the situation was that bizarre, and I would have explained everything to her, Damon said confidently. And prove that I'm an incompetent specialist? Madeline responded indignantly. Asking a colleague for advice to resolve a confusing situation is not a sign of incompetence, Damon replied. It's a sensible solution to a problem. Then why have you never asked me for advice? Madeline asked. I haven't needed any advice, Damon replied. And if you did need advice, would you come to me? She asked. If I thought you could help me with the issue, then yes, I would ask you for advice, he answered. You're one of the best specialists in the clinic. Madeline said irritably. Do you really need anyone's advice? Yes, sometimes I do need advice from other colleagues, Damon replied. Madeline, you don't need to think I'm some grumpy doctor from a TV show. You're not an intern for me to constantly teach, scold, or joke about your incompetence. Right now, you're my assistant, so help me, and don't damage the reputation of my department. Why won't you listen to what I'm saying? Madeline shouted, slamming the documents on the table. That patient was crazy. That woman will ruin her daughter's health. Even if you're right, Damon said irritably, did anything change today after your outburst in the clinic? Did you manage to help the girl? I tried to explain everything to her mother, she replied quietly. Did you succeed? Madeline sighed sadly. The patient had yelled at her, taken her daughter out of the office, and threatened to file a complaint against her. I don't think so, Madeline admitted. Maybe you could have helped if you had calmly explained everything, Damon said. Now, who knows where she'll take her daughter to have an abortion when she isn't even pregnant? Please, next time, control your emotions, and if you don't know how to explain something to the patients, call me. Alright, Madeline nodded. You're right. I apologize for the scene at work. Admitting your mistakes is a very good trait, Damon said with a smile. After Madeline left the office, Damon dialed his wife's number, but Brooke didn't answer right away. It turned out she had completely forgotten about their plan to go to the movies that evening. "I'm sorry, darling, I had a lot of work today," she admitted. "Let's reschedule the movie for a few days later. I'll finish my project at work and be completely free." Damon agreed. Lately, both he and his wife had been spending more time at work. But he knew they needed to spend more time together. Other than that, their life together was quite normal. At the beginning of their relationship, they had a tough financial period, which almost led to their breakup. But Damon started working at the private clinic and quickly became a renowned doctor. Once those hard times passed, Brooke no longer blamed him for earning a small income. It even seemed like she was proud of him. Damon picked up their son from his parents' place, and together they started preparing dinner for Brooke's return. Brooke came home very late, so little Finley was already asleep. "Where have you been?" Damon asked. "Our son was waiting for you to come home. He made a salad himself and wanted to feed his mom." "I'm sorry, Damon, I had a lot of work," she replied. "I'll have the salad for breakfast and thank Finley then. Now, let's go to bed." Damon decided not to confront his wife, seeing her gentle smile. Besides, he was exhausted from work and just wanted to sleep. Brooke went to shower, while he lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. His thoughts were interrupted by a short ring on his wife's phone. He picked it up from the table and saw a missed call from her boss. Just as he was about to take the phone to Brooke, who had just turned off the water, a message popped up. Brooke's phone was set to display the text of recent messages on the screen. Unintentionally, Damon read the message from her boss, "Good night, beautiful woman." Damon put her phone back on the table and felt a surge of resentment. "Brooke, what's this about?" Damon asked, showing her the message on her phone when she came out of the bathroom. "Why were you looking through my phone?" Brooke replied irritably. "I accidentally saw the message," Damon said. "Can you explain why he wrote that to you?" "No, I can't explain it," she replied, flustered as she read the message on her phone. "I don't know why my boss wrote that. Maybe he dialed the wrong number or he's drunk. It's very late, I don't want to argue with you before bed." Brooke spoke calmly, but Damon, who knew his wife well, noticed uncertainty in her voice. "Brooke, if you have another man, just tell me." "I'm not cheating on you," she said. "This message is a stupid mistake from my boss." "Okay, let's leave it at that," Damon agreed. "Damon, I swear, I'm faithful to you," Brooke added. Damon believed her words. Brooke had never given him a reason to doubt her fidelity. He hugged her shoulders, and she kissed him on the cheek in response. The next morning, Damon spent in the operating room. Several hours of intense work caused a severe headache. He sat in his office, pressing his throbbing temples with his hands. "Damon, I wanted to ask you something," Madeline said, stopping in the doorway. "Are you feeling all right?" "I have a headache," he replied. "What is it?" "Nothing, I just wanted to ask if you've had lunch today," she asked. "I think I ate something today," he replied with a smile. Madeline smiled too. She decided not to ask her boss the question she originally had in mind but instead invited him to lunch. After eating, Damon felt much better. During their conversation, he realized that his new colleague no longer irritated him. In fact, he found talking with Madeline quite interesting. "My father was surprised when I decided to apply to medical school," she said with a shrug. "He wanted me to follow in his footsteps." "I've heard that before," Damon said quietly. "What does your father do?" "He's an architect," Madeline replied. "He owns a large construction company in our city, not far from this clinic. The company specializes in building residential homes." "I know the company you're talking about," Damon nodded. "My wife works there as an architect." "I see," Madeline responded with a sad smile. "I didn't know you were married. You don't wear a wedding ring. Do you have any children?" "I don't wear my ring at work because it's uncomfortable," Damon explained. "Yes, I have a child." Madeline smiled again, but there was a hint of sadness. "Is something wrong?" Damon asked. No, Madeline shook her head. I'm just tired from work. She looked out the window at the beautiful view of the city. Someone from the clinic asked Damon to see a patient, so he left. Madeline continued to watch the slowly moving cars outside for a while. Suddenly, a smile appeared on her face. My boss was very drunk last night and simply dialed the wrong number, Brooke said when Damon returned home that evening. He's really embarrassed about that message. You can ask him yourself if you want. I won't do that, Damon replied. If he made a mistake, then fine. When are we going to the movies? Yes, we will, but later, Brooke answered with a smile. Damon, the owner of our company, is thrilled with my project and has invited me to join him for a meeting with investors. He wants to turn my residential area project into an entire complex. Do you understand what this means? It's a real success. That's great news, Damon said happily. When are you going? We have to leave tomorrow, Brooke said with an apologetic smile. Pretty soon, Damon chuckled. How long will you be gone? A week, maybe a bit longer. Are you happy for me? Of course, I'm happy for you. Brooke left on a business trip with the owner of company, and Damon asked his parents to help with their son. His mother was unhappy about the request but agreed to look after Finley. Damon picked up his son in the evenings after work and planned to take Finley to a trampoline center over the weekend. But from the very start, things didn't go as planned. Instead of the trampoline center, Damon and Finley went to the clinic, which Finley was delighted about. The boy had only been to his dad's work a few times and was eager to go again. Damon hurried to see his patients and left his son in his office with a sheet of paper and some crayons. But Finley decided to take a stethoscope from the shelf and give his favorite teddy bear a checkup. At that moment, Madeline walked into the office. Hello, she said with a smile. I was looking for your dad. Hello, he's not here, Finley replied confidently. She sat down next to the boy and tried to chat with him. Finley was a talkative child, and Madeline quickly found common ground with him. When Damon walked into his office, he saw them playing doctor. Who's this doctor here? He asked with a smile. Oh, this is a wonderful doctor, Madeline replied. He's helped me solve all my health problems. Then I guess we'll have to take this wonderful doctor to the trampoline center. Hearing his father's promise, Finley smiled and hugged his teddy bear tightly. Sorry, Damon, I got carried away playing with your son and got distracted from work, Madeline said apologetically. It's all right. Thank you for keeping him company. You have a great son, Madeline said with a smile as she left the office. From that day on, Madeline and Damon's relationship became friendly. Brooke's business trip was taking longer than expected. In the first few days, she called Damon several times a day. Then it became once a day, and in the last couple of days, she only sent short messages. But Damon didn't really notice. He realized he hadn't heard his wife's voice in days only when Finley asked and Mom would return from her trip. Damon called Brooke, and she answered almost immediately. Damon, I'll be home in 2 days. We're signing the project documents tomorrow. We did it, she said excitedly, but Damon felt a twinge of jealousy. Brooke did return home a couple of days later. When Damon went to the airport to pick her up, he witnessed a peculiar scene. His wife was walking with an older man, likely the owner of company. Brooke hadn't noticed her husband in the crowd yet, but her companion did and suddenly put his arm around her. Damon saw that she didn't mind his touch. The man kissed her on the cheek as they parted, and Brooke quickly turned away from his when she saw her husband watching. What was that? Damon asked, displeased. Let's talk about this in the car, Brooke suggested. Once in the car, Damon looked at his wife, clearly upset. I understand this looks strange, Brooke said, but I don't know why my his acts this way. Oh, come on, Brooke, stop lying to me. I'm telling you the truth, she defended herself. He kisses everyone on the cheek. It's just his way of interacting. I don't get it, Damon said harshly. I don't like it either, but I have a project. And I got this opportunity thanks to his help. I'm now the lead architect at a major company. Once I finish this project, I can work anywhere. Do you even realize how much my projects will be worth? Brooke, I'm happy for you, but I don't want another man touching and kissing you, Damon replied. He treats everyone that way, Brooke repeated. I'll quit after this project is done. And until then, you'll let him do whatever he wants. Damon said angrily. Do you really think I would let him come on to me? Brooke retorted, frowning. Damon, I'm doing this for our family. So that you, me, and Finley can have everything we need. Damon sighed. It's not my fault that you can't provide for the family, so I have to, Brooke continued. Are you saying the money I make isn't enough? Damon asked, outraged. So, my earnings aren't sufficient for you? You earn decently, Brooke sighed. But there are families with more. You're a very talented doctor, but you've never been good at making a lot of money. Sweetheart, there will always be people who live better than us. How much do I need to earn for you to stop letting old men touch you? Why are you talking about me like I'm cheating on you? Brooke asked, tears in her eyes. I'm not saying that, Damon replied. But what am I supposed to think? First, your boss sends you weird messages, and now I see the owner of company kissing you on the cheek. That doesn't mean I'm cheating on you, Brooke said, turning away. After those words, Brooke was upset with her husband. Damon tried to start a conversation several times, but she responded with silence and indifferent looks. The whole evening at home, she only talked to their son and went to sleep on the couch in the living room. Are you mad at me? Damon asked. I don't want to talk to you, Brooke replied harshly. I hate jealous men. I remember how, 4 years ago, you were jealous of every nurse at my work. And there wasn't even a hint of me cheating. None of them called me at night or hugged me when we met. And that doesn't prove you didn't cheat on me with them, she said angrily. Wonderful, Damon said quietly and went to bed. In the morning, he didn't see his wife at home. By the time he woke up, she had already left for work. Damon woke their son, they had breakfast together, and then went about their day. He dropped Finley off at his grandmother's and headed to the clinic. But Damon was in a bad mood and couldn't concentrate on his work. Is something wrong? Madeline asked. No, nothing's wrong. I just didn't sleep well last night, Damon replied. Madeline, can I ask you something? Of course, she said with a smile. It might seem like a strange question, Damon warned, but is your father married? No, he and my mom divorced a long time ago, she explained. My father dates young women from his work. I've lost count of how many there have been. I don't even remember their names anymore. He's an aesthete, he likes women who are both beautiful and smart. And he helps his lovers with their careers. He recently went on vacation with some woman. Why do you ask? Just curious, Damon replied, stunned. I just got interested, for some reason. Aren't you curious about my mom? Madeline laughed. She's an interesting woman. No, I'm not. Sorry for asking about your father, he said and quickly walked down the corridor. Madeline watched him leave and shrugged. The front door opened, and Damon looked up from his phone. It was his wife coming home from work. Boys, where are you? Brooke called out. Why is it so quiet at home? She peeked into the room and saw the serious expression on Damon's face. Why are you sitting alone in the dark, and where's Finley? She asked. I left him with my parents, Damon replied. We need to have a serious talk. You want to talk to me? Fine, Brooke agreed. But first, I'm going to have dinner. Of course, Damon responded. Brooke went to the kitchen, took the leftover stew from the fridge, placed the container in the microwave to heat up, filled the kettle with water, and turned it on. The kitchen was filled with the sounds of several appliances, and in the silence of the apartment, these noises seemed unnervingly loud. She expected Damon to come to her so they could talk in a friendly setting, but he never appeared in the kitchen. Brooke had dinner alone, surrounded by silence. Her husband didn't say a word from the next room. "Damon, what's going on?" she asked, appearing in the doorway of the room. "Are you messing with me?" "How am I messing with you?" Damon asked, surprised. "I'm waiting for you to finish eating so we can talk." "You're doing it very strangely, not making a sound," Brooke replied. "Sorry, I was just reading the news," Damon explained. "Should I have turned on some music for you?" "Don't joke around," Brooke said, displeased. "What's happening?" Damon locked his phone screen and placed it next to him on the table. Brooke sat down in the chair opposite him. "Brooke, let's get a divorce," Damon suggested. "What did you just say?" Brooke asked in shock, her mouth slightly open. "Why should we get divorced? Have you gone crazy with jealousy?" "I know everything. I even understand why you did it," he said. "I just don't get why you're denying your infidelity." Brooke moved closer to him, knelt on the floor, hugged his knees, and looked up at him with a tender expression in her eyes. "Damon, what am I denying?" "What infidelity?" she asked. "Don't do that," Damon requested. "You know I always forgive you when you look at me like that." "What am I denying?" Brooke asked, pretending she hadn't heard his words. Her gaze became even more tender, slightly nervous, and very touching, so Damon decided to turn away and not look at her. "I've realized that I haven't been needed for a long time," he replied. "You're happy at work in the arms of another man. I don't understand why you keep trying to convince me that it means nothing." "Why do you think that?" Brooke asked irritably. "Is it all because of the kiss on the cheek?" "Damon, please, listen to me. It was an accident. Yes, it was my mistake to let someone else hug me. But I was just emotionally shaken. If you want, I can quit this job. I can hand the project over to someone else, take the project fee, and resign. Will that make you happy?" "You don't need to do that," Damon said. "It's your job, your career. Then what should I do to make you believe me?" "Nothing, you don't need to do anything," Damon said. "I don't want to ruin our lives. Get a divorce, and we'll both be happier." Brooke got up from the floor and looked down at her husband. "Damon, tell me honestly. Is there another woman in your life?" Brooke asked, her voice trembling with worry. "No, there's no one else," Damon answered sincerely. "But is there another man in your life? Where did you really go last time?" "I went on a business trip," Brooke replied. "Do you want me to show you the tickets? And the hotel receipt?" "Yes, show me," Damon agreed. "Tomorrow I'll bring you the papers from work," Brooke assured him. "All right," Damon said with a faint smile. "I went on a business trip at the company's expense," Brooke explained defensively. "I didn't pay for anything during the trip. The owner of company, Arnold, took care of all the expenses. He must be a very good boss." "Are you mocking me again?" Brooke asked with a sigh. "You know what, Damon, maybe you're right. Let's get a divorce. I'm not going to convince you any longer. I've never lied to you or been unfaithful. If you want to end things by accusing me of infidelity, then let's do it your way." "So, you've changed your mind?" Damon asked. "Why not? You accuse me of cheating, and I'm supposed to beg you to stay?" "No, you don't owe me anything." "Good, I won't ask you to stay. I always thought my husband was a real man, but it turns out he's just a real liar. So let's get divorced." Brooke stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Damon sat there for a long time, contemplating what Brooke had said. Her behavior made him doubt whether he had made the right decision. The next morning, he went to Brooke's workplace. He wanted to speak directly with her boss, the person who had been sending strange messages to his wife at night. Damon unexpectedly appeared in front of the man on the street, making him slightly nervous. "Who are you?" her boss asked. "I'm Damon, Brooke's husband. Do you know her?" Damon inquired. "Sir, I must have dialed the wrong number," he admitted honestly. "I have never flirted with your wife." "Okay. But who has been flirting with her?" Damon asked. Her boss smirked for some reason. He looked fairly young and had a memorable appearance. His eyes seemed sly. Sorry, what's your name? He asked. My name is Damon. Nice to meet you, Damon. I'm Henry, he said. Damon, I hold a rather low position in this company. Don't be upset, I don't want our conversation to lead to a divorce. Your wife is certainly an attractive woman, but she's not entirely honest. What are you talking about? Damon asked. I came here to find out the truth, not to cause trouble or fight. Tell me everything you know. Your wife is the mistress of the owner of our company, our boss. I'm not needed by her, and probably neither are you, Henry said. With that, Henry walked towards the main entrance of the building. Within a few seconds, he was out of sight behind the office doors. Damon was left standing in the parking lot, stunned by the truth he had just learned. In the boss's office, no one spoke. Pete studied Damon's leave request carefully, occasionally glancing at the subordinate over his reading glasses. Is something wrong? Pete asked. Yes, I'm getting divorced from my wife, Damon replied. I need a week off to think things through. Divorce is a significant matter. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, Pete said as he signed the leave request. You told me something similar when I got married, Damon smirked. Don't mind me, Pete chuckled. I've had 3 weddings myself. Damon shook his head sadly. What will you do on your time off? Pete asked. I need to reflect on my life, Damon answered. Can't you think about it at work? Pete inquired. Or does thinking work differently at work? At work, I focus on work. If I start thinking about my personal problems while I'm at work, my patients will give birth without me, Damon joked. That's a good attitude, Pete agreed. Just don't stress out too much, okay? If you think I'm taking this time off to drink heavily, you're mistaken, Damon said. I'm not planning to become an alcoholic anytime soon. That's good to hear. Pete said, relieved. That's the right decision. My wife mentioned that you visited her in cardiology. Are you having heart problems? You're still a young man. That day, I had a high pulse. Nothing serious, Damon said with a dismissive wave. In reality, Damon had noticed his health instability for some time. After recent events in his life, changes in his heart rate became more apparent. For a young, non-drinking, non-smoking man under 40, these were concerning signs. At first, he planned to check his health at the clinic where he worked and even visited the cardiology department. But he reconsidered, knowing that Pete would immediately find out the results. Damon didn't want to share his health issues with anyone. On the first day of his leave, Damon decided to rest at home, and on the second day, he went for an examination. So, what do you say? Damon asked the doctor, a sweet young woman with kind eyes. He caught a glimpse of his ECG and noticed that the pattern significantly differed from normal readings. You need a little treatment, and everything will be fine. There's nothing alarming in what I see on the ECG. You've probably been under some stress recently, right? What do you do for a living? I'm a doctor, a gynecologist, Damon replied. You don't need to sugarcoat it, just tell me the truth. Hearing this, the young woman blushed slightly and pressed her lips together. Of course, he wasn't dying. After all, he'd managed to live to his age, so he'd continue to live. But Damon found the role of a patient less appealing than that of a doctor. So at home, he took out his ECG and the doctor's report and began to study the curved lines and read the interpretation on his own. Suddenly, someone rang the doorbell. Damon opened the door without asking who it was. It turned out that Madeline was standing in the hallway. Hi, colleague, she greeted cheerfully. How are you feeling? Hi, Damon responded, confused. You disappeared so suddenly from work. I was told you're on leave now, she said. I thought we've been getting along well at work lately, so I decided to drop by. Come in, Damon invited her. But I don't have anything to offer you. I brought a cake, she said, noticing the papers in his hands. What are those? Nothing, he replied, crumpling up the doctor's report and tossing it into the trash can. They talked for a long time in the kitchen, eating cake, and then moved to the living room. As Damon watched Madeline animatedly telling a story, he thought about how her voice and gestures used to irritate him so much recently, but now they seemed endearing. Should I make something for you? She offered. I'm getting hungry. Let me cook instead, Damon said confidently. Otherwise, I'll seem like a bad host. Great. To be honest, I don't really know how to cook, she shrugged. But I can chop vegetables for a salad. Who cooks for you at home? A chef? Damon asked. Damon, I'm not rich enough to have a personal chef. I buy prepared meals from the supermarket, she said. Good option, Damon smirked. But I can learn, she said softly. Will you teach me? I'm not sure I can, he replied. The way Madeline asked her last question sounded very tender, as if she were asking about something other than food. Damon put the meat on the electric grill and looked at her. She stood in the doorway, watching him intently and biting her lips. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes, Damon said. Great, Madeline replied. Damon turned on the kettle and asked, Do you want tea or coffee? I want you, the girl said calmly. Damon paused with an empty cup in his hand, feeling a sharp pain in his head. Madeline approached him from behind and hugged him. There's no need for this, Damon said, turning to the girl and gently removing her arms from around him. Madeline looked at him with piercing eyes and asked, What did you just say? Are you rejecting me? Damon carefully took her hand in his and tried to explain, You're a wonderful and undeniably beautiful girl, but I don't have feelings for you. I'm sorry. Do you understand what you're saying? Madeline asked, pulling her hand away. I'm telling you the truth, Damon said. So, you're a foolish man, she said with a nervous smile. Do you know how many men would love to be in your place? You're a very beautiful girl. What does my beauty have to do with it? She shouted indignantly. If you were with me, you'd have so many opportunities. You could become a renowned doctor in the media. We could open our own clinic. I would do everything for you. You're a great doctor but a completely foolish person. Do you think I should have pretended to love you, knowing all the possibilities, and then use your father's money and connections? Do you have to pretend with me? Madeline asked. You're beautiful and very wealthy, but I don't love you, Damon replied. If you weren't such a foolish person, you'd fall in love with me, she said. Then I must be a foolish person, he said. Madeline bit her lip in frustration and shouted as she left the apartment, You'll regret this. Left alone in the kitchen, Damon continued to set the table. He heard the front door slam and then the sound of footsteps fading away. Madeline had left his apartment, making a dramatic exit with the sound of her heels clacking. Sitting at the table, Damon contemplated his thoughts. He felt he had made a mistake somewhere. No, it wasn't the mistake of rejecting intimacy with Madeline. Despite their pleasant conversation, he didn't feel any special affection for her. Her words about missed opportunities made him think about how easily someone could be swayed by more influential people, and perhaps that person would even welcome it. Damon, shifting his focus away from his health issues, returned to work. Damon, you're finally back, the nurses greeted him cheerfully when he appeared at the clinic. Did you miss me? To be honest, we're tired of that girl, one of the women said. Damon immediately understood who she was referring to. He decided to drop by Madeline's office to talk. But as he approached the door, he heard her talking on the phone. He was about to leave when he suddenly heard her mention his name. Damon had never eavesdropped on conversations before, he considered it wrong. But today was an exception because Madeline was once again mentioning his name while talking on the phone. Damon is coming back to work today. Listen, I don't know what to do. Okay, I'll tell him that I was wrong last time. I shouldn't have acted like that. But I really liked him. I've only seen people like him in movies. He's a true professional, saving people's lives. He's not interested in my parents' money, he's a doctor to be proud of. I did so much to win his affection, and he rejected me. Alright, I won't talk to him like that anymore. I think he hasn't completely rejected me yet, he's just unsure. Maybe I came to his place too soon. The girl laughed cheerfully and ended the call. Damon moved away from the door. Suddenly, everything became clear to him. It was strange to think about it, but he realized he had been wrong. The door opened, and Madeline walked out of the office. Damon looked at her disapprovingly, and she realized he had overheard her conversation. "Hi. How long have you been standing there?" she asked, embarrassed. "Since you mentioned that I'm coming back to work today," he replied. "I thought I was speaking quietly on the phone. I have very good hearing." Madeline lowered her head and bit her lip out of frustration. "I just really liked you," she explained. "It's rare for me to really like someone." "Did you do all this to make me suspect my wife of cheating?" Damon asked. "Not exactly," Madeline replied. "Henry came up with the idea. He was sending her messages and calling her at night. He wanted you to think your wife was cheating, and when you two broke up, he would start pursuing her. I just joined his plan and asked my dad to help. It must be fun to manipulate other people's lives," he said. "Honestly, no," Madeline admitted. "I really liked you. I fell in love for the first time, and you turned out to be a married man with a child. Well, you succeeded. I believed in my wife's infidelity and unfairly hurt her. So, I'm the bad girl, and your wife is the best woman," Madeline said disgruntledly. She could have told Henry to stop bothering her. And she could have told my father not to hug her in front of everyone, but for some reason, she stayed silent. "Let's talk about you instead," Damon suggested. "Why talk about me? Yes, I did all this, but you believed it. You didn't even need evidence of infidelity, you immediately filed for divorce. Is that love? If there's trust in a family, this shouldn't happen. And it seems you didn't even have a family." Damon was silent. Madeline's words made him reflect. After all, he did love Brooke. Why did he so easily believe she was unfaithful? "So don't blame me for your divorce. Consider it a test for your family, and you didn't pass it together." "Maybe you're right, but that doesn't change anything," Damon replied. "I'm still a beautiful girl, and you're still a great doctor and a wonderful man who I still like," Madeline said. "What if you realize you love me?" "That's an offer I can't refuse," he said with a smirk. "Exactly." Madeline smiled and headed for the exit. At that moment, Damon felt his heart racing rapidly in his chest. He started counting the rhythm, realizing it was irregular. Suddenly, his vision darkened. He hurried to sit on a small sofa in the hallway. Madeline, who had not yet left, ran up to him. "What's wrong, Damon? Is it your heart?" Damon nodded silently, and Madeline called the cardiology department. "It's okay. I'll feel better soon," Damon whispered. While waiting for the cardiology doctor to arrive, the girl gently stroked Damon's arm, trying to calm him. "Brooke, forgive me. I said a lot of hurtful things to you," Damon said when he saw his ex-wife. "I'm sorry I didn't come to you earlier. I needed to go through treatment." "I know. Arnold told me about it." "I'm glad you went through with it," she replied. "I'm not angry at you. At first, it hurt a bit, but I got over it. I'm glad it happened this way. Now I have everything I didn't before." "That's good," Damon said. He felt a complex mix of emotions listening to his ex-wife's words. He knew that Brooke had recently moved into Madeline's father's house. "You were a good husband," Brooke said with a smile. "You weren't perfect, but you were good," she continued. "You've always been popular with women, so I'm sure you'll find another wife." Damon stayed silent. He noticed that Brooke's tone wasn't entirely friendly. "Can you take Finley for a week?" she asked. Of course, he agreed. In a few months, Brooke would break up with Arnold, realizing he wasn't what she had imagined. She would then move in with her parents. Eventually, she would meet a man she would marry, but unfortunately, Finley would never get along with his new stepfather. Madeline would decide to quit her job at the clinic, and Damon would later find himself missing her a bit, but they would never meet again. At a school event, Finley would proudly say he admired his father and wanted to become a doctor like him. He would keep his promise, though he would choose a slightly different medical specialty. The following year, Damon would meet a woman in an elevator who would later become his wife.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.